Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel for episode 2 of Dark Fun in the Dark Sun, also probably known as the one where we make a lot of friends. But before we get into that, if you didn't check out the last episode, make sure you check it out here or down below, and away we go. So for this session, we actually had a full table, which doesn't happen very regularly, but has been happening pretty regularly lately, which is kind of odd. But before we started, the person who played Dono had to roll up his character. If you remember, we have two half-giant brothers, the Largeson brothers. Well, now we have 3. Last session they had rolled and they determined that there were 7 siblings total. So the person that played Dono decided to be one of those siblings. So he is a half-giant and he's a Valor Bard and he's the youngest of the brothers. But because half-giants aren't too smart, even though there's only 7 siblings, his dad named him 8th Wonder. Like as an 8th Wonder, which is his stage name, 8th Wonder of the World. He's a bit of a creative soul and he was babied by mommy and picked on by all his brothers. So you can imagine how this went with the 3 of them there. We started off the session and we were like knee deep in a pile of dead elves that we had taken care of the session before because, you know, they said Kadan would pay later and instead they paid. And that's by the time that Lord Jackhammer decided, hey, I'm an overseer now. I want all my friends on my crew. And when 8th got there, they put him on that crew as well because he's a half giant. But how did 8th get there? Well, we flashed back and we figured it out. So basically 8th was in the elven market. There was a half elf and some fancy elves and they were picking on the half elf and they were dishing it out to him and the half elf was dishing it back and they called him a race defiler. Well, 8th heard this and because he's not the sharpest tool in the shed, he was like, oh no, it's a defiler. I need to help them. So he went over and he held the half elf back and just let these guys go to town on him. A lot of other elves come over to watch the situation going on, and then the Templar came in with some half-giants to stop everything. Well, at that point, 8th is like, ah, this is terrible, I'm out of here. And he turns to run, and he runs face first into a wall and knocks himself out. And that's how he ends up in the slave pits. But because he's a Valor Bard and he's always trying to, you know, hype himself up, the story that he told to his brothers was that he saw them get caught and he knew that if he got caught too and came into the pits, they could all break out together. Which I feel like the brothers wouldn't believe because they know 8th, but also they're all stupid, so maybe they did. But then back to that night, Lord Jackhammer decided to go see Phoebus, who is in charge of the mixing crew, and be like, listen, I want my 2 friends. I want Raylan and little Jenny and I want them on my team. And he was like, no, this isn't gonna happen. And so they talked back and forth and Lord Jackhammer shoved him down like a million times and finally he was like, all right, you give me these guys, which are NPCs, and you can have your friends. Then Lord Jackhammer goes back to his room. His roommate is there. He's another overseer and he's a human named Argus and he's not looking so good. He's looking pretty exhausted. But Lord Jackhammer doesn't really pay attention or doesn't really care. Morning came along and we actually all leveled up. The way that we're doing leveling up in this campaign is basically landmarks that we're hitting instead of doing points like, okay, we did this thing and now you level up to the next level. It's just a way that the DM's trying to make sure that our characters get up to the correct level when the campaign's over because we're rolling through it pretty quickly. Before we went to bed the night before, Kadan, who's a cleric of the Grave Domain, buried all the elves that we killed. So at least around us there were no dead bodies while we were sleeping. Then we went to get water, and while we're standing in line to get water, the 3 Largeson idiots are like, I'm gonna lift more water than you today, like forever. And so they're like, no, I'm gonna lift more water than you. As you can imagine then, as a crew, we lifted a lot of water. So much that Phoebus and his mixing crew couldn't keep up, and it slowed down production down the line. Phoebus wasn't happy with that, because he was told that if you screw up one more time like that, you're out. At dinner that night, Melanda, who is the preserver that Bardock got thrown in here, is serving us food and she's wondering why Lord Jackhammer was talking to the Templar the night before. And he said, you know, they asked me to tell them about any escape plans and any preservers that I see. And then she goes ahead and tells him, well, I'm in the Veiled Alliance. And he's like, but you're my cousin, so it's fine. This guy is such an idiot, but I love it. Next, we flash back to when Kadan was taken into slavery, and he's just down the street when all of a sudden, like, an army and a bunch of Templar come and block off the street, and they sort you into 2 sides. The side that can pay for their freedom and therefore get out, and the other side that's homeless and is gonna end up in slavery. Well, Kadon decides to try to gamble his way out of this and is like, I'll roll you for my freedom. It didn't work. And so he decided to fight back, and a couple of the guys around him joined in, and so we got to play some of the characters. There was like a Thrycreen and this really awesome barbarian guy named Aramis, who was just like so stoked to fight, and I got to play as him, and it was a lot of fun, especially because he had so many hit points. But sadly, he did go down in the end. After that, we popped back into the pits, and little Jenny was approached by the human that she had let know that Crew Rex was listening to them. He said he really appreciated what she did, and he said that they were planning a breakout, and he'd definitely like to have her and her friends involved with that. Well, now we're in the situation where Lord Jackhammer said that he would tell the Templar about any escape plans. But Lord Jackhammer's an idiot, and he's like, oh, that's a breakout, that's not an escape. So I think we're okay for now. And this guy's name is Grange, and he's old, and he's been here for a while. So I mean, if anyone's figured out how to get out, it's probably him. Then Lord Jackhammer goes back to his room, and his poor roommate buddy Argus is like super exhausted. It's just the days are getting to him. The next morning, Phoebus comes back. He's like, listen, I want little Jenny and Raylan back. And Lord Jackhammer's like, no, this is not happening, and manages to intimidate him to leave him alone. Well, you'd think after our output the day before, we would kill it. We didn't. And so at the end of the day, we ended up having to work an extra shift because it just didn't happen. But we were lucky to meet a really nice Templar. His name was Candelandu, and he was like, look, I got some food for you. It's not a lot, but it's something. And then if you remember from our other campaign, Bardock summoned a dinosaur that killed Candelandu. So at least we got a little bit of his help here. Somewhere in the midst of our day of hauling water, when we took one of our breaks, Aramis came up, that barbarian guy, and he was jazzed that Kadon was in here. He's like, yeah, you're my friend, this is awesome! And I don't remember why, but we started calling him Charles or Charlie or Chuck. So I guess that's his nickname now? I don't know. And then we rolled back to see how Raylan and little Jenny got captured. If you remember, little Jenny had managed to escape capture, and Raylan had seen her coming out of the city, and Raylan was like, hey, that's a cool halfling that I would like to know. So she ended up meeting up with her, and they went to the Golden Inix Inn pub, and they were having some drinks. Things went down. There was like slopping and spilling. There was this Thrycreen named Jakaran, aka Doug the Bug. I think it was Doug the Bug from last session, like that's what we named him. My DM says it's Dave. I can't find where I wrote down my notes, but I was watching through some of the old Welcome to the Dark Sun videos, and I definitely said Doug the Bug, so I'm just gonna go with it. So after the innkeeper's slave dwarf like spills stuff all over Chichikaran, he offers some wine because he feels bad. And we drink the wine, and it's actually sleeping poison. So out we all go, except for little Jenny, who makes her con save. So she pieces out through the window, and she runs down, and she decides to sneak into this building. And as she's like dropping into it, she drops into like a Templar talking to the blacksmith, and there we go, now she's in with us too. So back in the pit, after we got our food from Candelandu, we headed over to the place that we were sleeping, and Aramis was waiting there for us, aka Charlie. He was like, I just wanted to keep your place where you're sleeping nice and safe, you know, make sure it's good, and I also have this bottle of wine, which I don't know where he got it from, but we drank it, and then Kadon kept the bottle for future purposes. In the morning, Halvar is just raising hell and trying to get a bunch of people in trouble. He like shoved them in the water line and was like, oh, they're planning an escape, they're trying to get out. And then Eighth started making fun of Phoebus. I mean, these Largeson brothers are just more trouble probably than they're gonna be worth, but we'll see. Phoebus is like, I did better than you guys did yesterday, so try to keep up. So Halvar like throws a rock at the back of one of his buddies' heads, and we do beat them pretty handily in output that day. And I think the best part is when the guy gets hit by the rock from Halvar, Lord Jackhammer's like, look, he got hit by a sky rock. And then we joked that like sky rocks were probably a pretty big thing in Largeson House. Like they're probably always just getting hit with these sky rocks. So after our first break, all of a sudden these like two women dressed up like gladiators start fighting, and they're rolling about. Kadon and little Jenny place bets on them to see who's going to win, and one's not trying to hurt the other one. They're like, listen, like this isn't my fault. They paired me up with Tacos, who, if you remember from Welcome to the Dark Sun, was one of the gladiators. Well, little Jenny puts a hold purse on one of them, and then two of the Largeson brothers just grab the woman and just huck them in opposite directions, breaking up that battle. That night, Phoebus didn't hit his quota, so they ended up missing dinner. Ha! Take that, Phoebus. And at dinner, our new friend Charlie saved a seat for us, and he was like, listen, Kadon, I will die for you. I will go to battle with you. And so he's got a new admirer, I guess. And he told us about how he was a slave in Europe and he got free and he came to Tyr and now he's a slave again. So he's not very good at that being free thing. That's when Dave, aka Doug, aka Karen the Bug, came up to me and was like, we were taken together in the inn. And he said, we are bonded by misfortune and now we are clutch mates. And I just made sure, you know, I'm an elf, you're a Thri-Kreen, you're not gonna eat me, right? And he was like, nope, we're all good. And then he and the Largeson brothers all arm wrestled because that's what you do. Charlie continues to tell us about his past and he's like, you know, I don't really like fighting for profit. I just like fighting on the side of the underdog. He likes a good uneven fight, basically. At around that point, Lord Jackhammer gets called by the Templar because Tithien wants to know if he knows anything about the Veiled Alliance. But Lord Jackhammer has to protect his cousin, Melandu, and so he just says he doesn't know anything. And then Tithien threatens the other Largeson brothers. But, like, Lord Jackhammer's really good at playing stupid or being stupid, so he was like, I don't know anything. Before he left to go to his, like, apartment for the night, Lord Jackhammer did tell us that his roommate Argus was like pretty dehydrated, so we sent some extra water with him because we are creating more than what we need now, which is super awesome. And once Argus is hydrated, Lord Jackhammer's like, hey, you want to arm wrestle? And so they do. And hilariously, Argus beats Lord Jackhammer. He's like, can you show me that move? Because that was awesome. A little bit later, as we're all kind of settling down to sleep, there's like this huge explosion heard and what kind of sounds like a dinosaur, and everything kind of rocks. That was us, by the way, and Bardock summoning a dinosaur, and now Candelandu's dead. Sorry, buddy. We wonder if we should use this panic and chaos as a time to escape, but suddenly we see like drops of blood appearing on the sand, and we're like, what's going on with that? And then whatever it is collapses. We stabilize this person, and we find out that it is Faldar of the Veiled Alliance. So the rest of us kind of set off trying to find Melanda because she's of the Veiled Alliance too. Raylan goes out and manages to find Melanda, and everybody else kind of makes their way back. And then suddenly a dwarven guard comes to investigate. Well, remember that wine bottle that Kadan took? He just bashes him on the head with it. And then there's a whole lot of fighting, but we managed to kill the dwarf. I mean, that wine bottle and like stabbing was very helpful. Raylan gets back with Melanda, and it turns out that she does actually know Faldar, and so she kind of helps patch him up a little bit, and we move him into our sleeping area so like nobody else will investigate. And he's not a slave, but for our own safety, he won't tell us what's going on. His plan is to heal up, and then in the morning, he's just gonna transform into somebody else, and then he can just walk out. And that was the end of the session. So we made a lot of friends. We figured out, I think now, how everybody ended up in captivity there, and we're slowly starting to get a hang of the situation, keeping ourselves hydrated and fed and not getting beat up. I still think Lord Jackhammer is gonna have a huge issue with Tithien, but we'll see what happens. If you did enjoy this episode, make sure you hit that like button down below and subscribe so you'll know when the next one goes up. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.